Welcome to the deep dive. Get ready, because today we're really plunging into the incredible and often pretty tumultuous life of Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yeah, LBJ. I mean, here's a figure who cast just a massive shadow over 20th century America, a man of immense power, deep contradictions.
And consequences, right. Stuff we're still feeling today.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we've pulled together some really fascinating material for you. We've got factual historical accounts, from organizations focused on White House history,
Okay.
but also alongside that, a more maybe dramatic exploration, one that really leans into the complexities, the shadows, and some of the, let's say, enigmas around his time in office.
Right, so different angles. Our mission then is to kind of cut through all that and pull out the most important insights for you. We're going to unpack, the key moments of his rise.
The sheer scale of his legislative achievements.
Yeah, and grapple with the burden of the war that, well, it consumed his presidency.
Yeah.
And explore those enduring, often debated questions about his legacy.
Think of it like charting a course. A remarkable journey, but often turbulent. This is someone who climbed out of rural poverty in Texas, became this legendary master politician.
Unbelievable skills.
Right. And then unexpectedly propelled into the nation's highest office, a moment of just profound tragedy.
And ultimately, he reshaped American society, but at the same time was sort of brought down by a devastating war.
That's the paradox.
Okay, let's unpack this story. Starting, well, where it all began. His origins and that seemingly unstoppable rise.
So Lyndon B. Johnson, born in Central Texas in 1908, and the sources really emphasize he absolutely understood, felt the pinch of rural poverty firsthand.
And that experience, it must have shaped him deeply.
Oh, absolutely. He, worked his way through Southwest Texas State Teachers College. That's Texas State University, San Marcos now.
Right.
His entry into politics was, early and successful. By 1937, he'd campaigned for the House, running on a platform supporting the New Deal.
FDR's programs.
Exactly. And his wife, Lady Bond, she was right there, playing a really key role in those early political efforts.
He also had that brief stint in the Navy during World War II, served in the South Pacific, even got a Silver Star.
Brief but notable. But Washington, that was where the real foundation of his power was built. After 6 terms in the House, he gets elected to the Senate in 1948.
And that's where his, political genius really took off, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. He rose so fast, minority leader in 53, then majority leader in 55 when the Democrats won control. I mean, the sources are unanimous on this. He was considered one of the most expert, brilliant politicians of his time, just a master of the legislative process and, personal persuasion.
This is where we got the legendary Johnson treatment, right? Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. It was something else. Imagine this whirlwind of charm, but also intimidation, flattery. He knew everything about his opponent's weaknesses.
And that physical presence, right?
Yeah.
Just relentless pressure.
Exactly. Leaning in, getting close. He knew how to get things done in Washington like few others, before or since.
But one perspective we looked at suggests that mastery, it maybe came with an unseen cost. What does that mean?
Well, it hints that maybe, achieving that kind of power, making those deals, maybe it cost him political capital down the line, or involved compromises, or just the sheer toll it took on people, including himself. It's a bit enigmatic.
Interesting. So this political giant, master of the Senate, he ends up as vice president in 1960, running with JFK.
Yeah, which many saw as, balancing the ticket, North and South, liberal, and, Johnson, bridging those divides.
Then, November 22, 1963.
The unthinkable.
Dallas, JFK's assassination.
Yeah.
And in those horrifying moments right after, Lyndon Johnson is sworn in as president aboard Air Force One.
That picture, with Jackie Kennedy beside him, grieving, is just seared into history.
Absolutely. It was such a sudden, profound, just staggering transition. You felt like the weight of the world just landed squarely on your shoulders right then and there. Yeah. And one source we looked at kind of explores that ascent, questioning if there was almost something preordained about it, given the path.
It raises that question, yeah. The timing, the improbable way he got there, it adds to the drama of it all.
So he steps into this moment of national unity, but also deep grief. And he seizes it, launches his vision, the Great Society.
Right, and this wasn't just, a few policies, it was a grand legislative agenda. The goal. Nothing less than eradicating poverty and racial injustice in America.
Ambitious.
Hugely ambitious. And he wasted no time using those political skills he'd honed for decades. He quickly got passage for key things Kennedy had been pushing for.
Like what?
Well, a major tax cut and monumentally the Civil Rights Bill. Signed it into law July 10th, 1964. And the sources highlight his own words that day, talking about the fundamental injustice of unequal rights. It was
And
powerful.
momentum, plus the national mood, his own skill.
Hmm.
It leads to that landslide victory in '64 against Goldwater, right?
Right? Oh, massive. Won by over 15 million votes. And crucially, it brought in a heavily Democratic Congress. Now he had the political muscle.
And he used it to push the Great Society forward fast.
He really did. I mean, 1965 alone, fueled by that mandate, Congress enacted landmark legislation, big federal aid boost to education, creating
Medicare is still a huge pillar today.
Absolutely. And he championed urban renewal conservation efforts, too.
And building on the Civil Rights Act,
Hmm.
maybe one of the most impactful achievements,
Yeah.
the Voting Rights Act of '65, August 6th.
So crucial. It systematically dismantled those legal barriers, the poll taxes, literacy tests, all the things that had kept African Americans from voting for decades.
Just fundamentally changing the landscape.
It really did. And, we shouldn't forget his longstanding support for the space program. He'd backed it from the start.
Right, which is why NASA's Human Spaceflight Center in Houston was later renamed for him in '73.
The Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center. Yeah, a testament to that commitment.
Okay, so you got this extraordinary period, legislative triumphs, building the Great Society framework, but at the same time, this dark shadow growing overseas.
Vietnam. Precisely. Like presidents before him, Johnson was, deeply concerned with Cold War containment policy, stopping communism.
He inherited the situation, but it escalated under him massively.
It really did. It rapidly escalated and became, as he apparently called it, his inescapable nightmare.
Starting with the Gulf of Tonkin resolution in '64, he just dramatically increased U.S. involvement.
Yeah, the number of American troops just ballooned. Eventually, 500,000 on the ground?
500,000.
The sources paint this picture of a president being drawn deeper and deeper into what felt like a quagmire that seemed to defy solution.
Were there efforts to negotiate?
There were efforts, yeah. Described in some material as largely secret attempts to broker a settlement, but they proved fruitless, just didn't work.
And as the war got worse, casualties mounted.
Yeah.
The controversy back home just exploded, right?
Yeah.
Especially by early '68.
Oh, it became acute, really intense. In March '68, Johnson announced a partial halt to the bombing of North Vietnam. The hope was to finally get formal peace talks going.
But the damage to public opinion, was it already too late?
It seems like it was pretty severe by then. As the war escalated, public dissent just grew louder and more passionate.
The anti-war movement really took hold, didn't it? Tearing society apart.
It really did. And Johnson, who used to be this master of public opinion, he found himself increasingly isolated, even reviled by some. His credibility, his authority constantly questioned.
It's interesting, one source we looked at even speculates, were there unseen forces or maybe subversive elements actively fanning those flames of dissent, adding another layer to the turmoil?
Yeah, it raises that possibility, reflecting the intense polarization of the time. His presidency ultimately became just overwhelmed by opposition to his war in Vietnam.
And he became isolated, personally, within the White House.
Very much so, according to accounts, a stark contrast to the backslapping, deal-making Johnson who thrived on personal connection.
And then, the bombshell. March 1968, that stunning announcement.
Yeah, Lyndon Johnson announces he will not seek re-election. Just shocks the world.
Why? Was it like some thought, just retreating to avoid defeat? Or was it genuine, like he said, wanting to focus entirely on finding peace without campaign pressures?
Well, his sources present both interpretations, maybe a mix of both. Hard to know for sure.
Regardless, he goes back to his Texas ranch after leaving office, and the sources describe him, by many accounts, as a broken man.
Yeah, weighed down. The burdens of the war, the way his political coalition had fractured, it took a heavy toll.
He died not long after, right? January 1973, a heart attack at the ranch.
That's right. And there's that poignant detail from one source. One of his last calls was supposedly from President Nixon, saying a Vietnam peace agreement was finally close.
Wow. Talk about timing.
Yeah. So his legacy, as the sources make really clear, it's just incredibly complex, a tapestry of triumph and tragedy.
Some perspectives even suggest it's still partly cloaked in shadow. What do they mean by that?
I think it reflects maybe the intense political maneuvering, the secrecy around the war, or just the sheer human cost involved in everything he did. It wasn't simple or clean.
But later generations, they have lauded him for those Herculean efforts on the Great Society, right?
Yeah,
Creating a more just society.
absolutely. Those programs had and have a massive impact. Yet people also grapple with and often regret that huge expansion of the military commitment in Vietnam.
So he goes from being seen as this brilliant legislative mind
Leaving office,
as one of the least popular presidents. It's a stunning reversal.
he had that quote, didn't he, in his final appearance before Congress in '69? Something like.
But I believe that at least it will be said that we tried.
Yeah, it sort of sums up that duality, doesn't it?
It really does. And those themes that pop up in some sources, shadows, unseen forces, maybe secret knowledge, they just add to the enigma.
Yeah, they suggest that even with everything we know, there might be dimensions to his presidency, maybe tied to the high stakes or his personality, that are still open to interpretation, still debated.
So there you have it, a deep dive into Lyndon B. Johnson. On one hand, the architect of some of the most transformative social legislation in U.S. history,
Built on just unparalleled political skill.
versus the commander-in-chief haunted and ultimately kind of broken by a disastrous war that tore the nation apart.
It's such a striking contrast. His masterful political rise, where he seemed just unstoppable,
Yeah.
and then his difficult, isolated departure from office, where the cost just became overwhelming. His legacy isn't simple at all. It's this potent mix of monumental achievement and, well, profound failure.
Which leaves us with a challenging thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over.
Mm.
Given what we've looked at, how do you reconcile it? The immense, positive, tangible impact of the Great Society.
I mean, real changes in people's lives.
Right. With the profound human cost and division caused by the Vietnam War. Was he ultimately defined more by those legislative triumphs or by the wartime struggles?
Hmm.
And what does his really complex story tell us about the burdens, the often contradictory burdens that are just inherent in the American presidency?